Welcome to Season 5 of Your Bird Story, a podcast about everyday people and their relationships and interactions with wild birds. I'm your host, Georgia Silvera Seamans. Okay, folks, we're back with another episode, and I'm excited to be talking with Edmundo Martinez, who lives right here in New York City in the beautiful borough of the Bronx. Edmundo, please introduce yourself to listeners.
My name's Edmundo. As you mentioned, I am from the Bronx. I am a lifelong resident of the Bronx, and I've been birding for a few years now and really excited to talk about birds.
What started you on your birding journey?
It's hard to say because it was very unintentional, and I think I even resisted calling myself a birder for a while. I would say I came to birding by way of cycling and spending time in local parks and meditation, as well as I just kind of started noticing more things around me and having this, I would say, need to be more outside and in tune with nature. I started noticing the birds, and then curiosity just started percolating as like, what was I seeing and why was it here? And I remember being like really surprised to see woodpeckers in my neighborhood parks. And, you know, I'm very fortunate to live alongside a river, the Bronx River, New York City's only freshwater river, I would say.
Yes.
So, you know, they had this beautiful diversity of birds. It was just like literally right outside my door that I just wasn't noticing until recently. And once I started, I found myself not being able to stop.
Why were you surprised to see woodpeckers in particular?
I don't know, because I would see egrets and herons, and friends would freak out over those. And so I was used to seeing like these really big, large aquatic birds. And, you know, again, I wasn't a birder, and I wouldn't call myself a birder at that time, but I would notice them like, oh, yeah, I've seen those before. But when I saw woodpeckers, it's just like, it didn't make sense to me that this super dense, often not cared for space, I would say by the government, not by community, would have woodpeckers. You know, it's like this felt like that was something that belonged in a much more woodsy park as opposed to an urban park, like a Van Cortlandt and a Pelham Bay, sure, but a Starlight and a Concrete, we have woodpeckers. Like that was just mind blowing to me.
I feel you. Actually, I'm working on this piece where I talk about woodpeckers and how I see them a lot in my neighborhood park, and it's kind of surprising when I first started noticing them. Can you tell us which species of woodpeckers you see?
They're mostly downy and hairy. I got a feeder behind my apartment, and a downy's been hanging out almost every day now. You do get the occasional northern flickers in Starlight Park. And just last week, I saw my first yellow-bellied sapsucker in Starlight Park as well, which I've been birding Starlight Park for, this is my second migration, spring migration, third fall, if that makes sense. So it was the first time that I saw a yellow-bellied sapsucker, and I was super excited about that. I don't know if it's the first time I noticed it. I'm sure they've been there before, but I didn't see them.
For folks who are not familiar with Starlight and Concrete Parks, can you describe the landscape for folks?
Oh, absolutely. So both parks are along the Bronx River corridor, which was also known as the Bronx River Greenway, which is a set of linear parks that stretch about 8 miles in the Bronx that is connected to the freshwater source in upper New York by the Kensico Dam in Valhalla. Both Concrete and Starlight are in the southern section of that, closer to the Long Island Sound / East River portion. So it's really a nice, very unique body of water because there's this blend of salt and fresh that's kind of going in and out depending on the tides. You know, you have fish, you have turtles, and then, you know, you attract the birds that like all of that. And then there's a good amount of trees. Starlight does have athletic fields, where concrete is more like an open space. I consider it an oasis, but concrete is a former concrete plant that was abandoned. That's why the park has that name, and it was advocated to turn into a park by community members, mostly by youth. And then to further activate the park in 2016, it became home to New York City's first publicly grown edible garden and foraging space, which is called the Foodway. So that's been another great highlight to the park where folks can actually forage for food and medicinal herbs and things of that nature. Because a lot of folks don't realize that foraging is illegal. And we do have this one space where this program has been working really great, and hopefully it can get replicated to other parts of New York City.
Yeah, I volunteered at Concrete Park in the foodway. I think it might have been last summer, and it was a really wonderful experience. Both the work of weeding, but then also learning about all the plants that are there, the history. We got to take home some samples.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm,
uh,
I'm not a forager, but I have picked some time to add to like my mashed potatoes.
okay. So it sounds like these two parks are the place where you spend a lot of time looking at birds. Are there other parts of the Bronx where you go birding?
Yes, absolutely. So, due to proximity to my house, I do spend a lot of time in Concrete and Starlight, but I frequent Soundview Park a lot. It's also further south from those two. I'm there regularly. I like to call Soundview Park like a baby Pelham Bay because it has a lot of the amenities of Pelham Bay Park, but with obviously not as large. I do frequent Pelham Bay as often as I can, at least once or twice a month due to the fact that there's so much that you can see there. You can knock out 30 to 40 species in a couple of hours that are like all different types because of your proximity to the Long Island Sound and the hiking trails that are more woody. I do like to support very intentionally super urban small parks like a Hunts Point Riverside Park, Barretto, Hunts Point Landing, because as I started getting into birding to the point where I was calling myself a birder, I noticed that, a lot of the birding was happening in Van Cortlandt and Pelham Bay, and the neighborhood parks weren't seeing as much as attention. And I just felt like there's got to be birds there. And I was noticing them. So I started using eBird intentionally to start putting that data out there in hopes that there's other birders like me who are, lifelong urban dwellers, come from Black and brown communities where maybe birding isn't so common as a lifelong New Yorker. You could feel like, oh, I don't have to go out to Central Park. I don't have to go out to Jamaica Bay. I don't even have to go out to Van Cortlandt or Pelham Bay, which are also predominantly white neighborhoods. I can bird right here in the quote unquote hood.
Yeah, that's right. I think the small parks are often underrated and overlooked, right? And a lot of New Yorkers live close to smaller parks. And it's kind of magical to discover the wide variety of species that you'll find in a small park, especially during migration.
Yeah, yeah. And I also love the interaction with the community members. Like they're already looking at you a little weird when they see you with binoculars in your hand. But then when you tell them what you're looking at, they often bug out like, what? Here? That is like an added, like, oh, I love this.
Yeah. Well, I have two questions for you right now, and I'm thinking, which should I ask first? Okay, was there a distinct moment when you said to yourself, okay, I'm going to call myself a birder now?
Oh man. So I had binoculars, I had Merlin, and I still wasn't calling myself a birder. I guess it started when I started using eBird sometime in 2023 and found myself intentionally seeking out the birds. Because before it was just like if I saw anything while I was doing anything else, cool. I was able to see it, identify it, maybe record it and learn what it was. But at some point, sometime in the fall migration of 23, I found myself like, oh no, I want to go see these things and look for them. It's not just for the walk, it's not just for the meditation. So I would say sometime in fall of 23, there was a lot going on in my life personally.
Hmm.
And the birding was definitely something that was bringing a sense of peace and joy to me. And that I think helped with the intentionality of seeking out the birds. And then as I was more vocal about it, I started learning some of my other friends were birders and they were keeping it on the low too. And like a cousin of mine, apparently she's a great birder and we never talked about any of that. And so I started having community around it. And that was definitely an easier transition to be like, oh yeah, I'm a birder.
Yeah, it's nice to give yourself credit for the skills that you develop, right? Through practice.
Yeah, and I think there's some of that too, some of that fear of I still struggle with a lot of stuff via ear. There's still some of the stuff that people would deem basic. I have to take some time with or refer or reach out to phone a friend. I have a friend who's like my bird guru that I really used them today on my walk. I was like, is this a common or red merganser? I'm having a tough time, and even Merlin is saying it's both. So I think that was that aspect too of birder came with a level of knowledge, at least a preconceived
Mm.
knowledge. That's the way I was kind of going into it, and I recognized that I was doing that because I often tell folks I'm a big cycling guy. And I often tell folks who be like, "Oh, I'm not a cyclist." I'm like, "Do you know how to ride a bike? Do you enjoy the act of riding a bike?" Yeah, so then you're a cyclist. It doesn't matter if you don't ride 50 or 100 miles or you only ride once a year on vacation. You're a cyclist still. So I had to remind myself of that kind of beginner's attitude to not say I'm not a birder.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think, sometimes it's easier to give others grace that we withhold from ourselves. So,
Oh, yeah.
so you mentioned eBird and Merlin, you have your binoculars. Can you walk us through your process for learning how to ID a bird? Like, yeah,
Ooh.
how did you know you were looking at, for example, a downy versus a hairy? Like, what's your process?
So let's say I'm at the park, I would struggle, but I would try to take, you know, whatever photos I could with my phone. Like, actually, trying to ID birds prompted me to get a new phone because I was with the same phone for like 7 or 8 years. And as I became a birder, I was like, I've got to get a better phone so I could document these. And then I'd come home and read up on them. I'd search the YouTube channels. I bought a lot of the books, haven't read most of them, but just kind of figuring out the little nuances in between the differences, listening to different podcasts to try to get those IDs and just spending time. And I have been very fortunate where I haven't experienced a lot of the negative encounters that many birders, specifically BIPOC birders, have. I've been very fortunate to have been embraced within the birding community in the Bronx, especially. Um, so I can lean on those folks, and any opportunity that I have to be around an experienced birder, I'll take it and I'll annoy them with 100 questions and tell them just let me know when I have to shut up because I'm just gonna keep asking questions. I lean on the experience of others and I just kind of nerd out with books and YouTubes, and I think there's a website that has like bird quiz or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
you can just I spent some time on that trying to get it, and I attempted seagulls this winter, and yeah,
Yeah,
attempted.
well, I think there are at least two books dedicated to gull ID.
Yeah.
And I purchased one and I gave it to a friend.
I did the Go Guides of America, and I said seagulls intentionally because I did like what the author of that book said about, recognizing that that's the kind of normal word that most people would identify it is. And we don't have to be so elite, like, well, there actually isn't such a thing, So, and then it's a good entry to kind of let folks know, like, hey, there are actually a bunch of different types. So I'm pretty good with ring-billed and herring, and of course the laughing gulls, because they're just so distinct. But once you get out of those three, I start struggling a little bit.
Yeah, and I feel like the adults, right, are easier to identify, like than the different years, first year, second year. I just get lost. I can't make those distinctions.
And the great black-back gulls as well, like because they're just so large with that black back, like those four. And agreed, I only identify adults. I don't even try with those first few stages.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a favorite bird?
Ooh, a favorite. I don't know if I have a favorite. Woodpeckers, I've always been interested with them. The pileated is one that I got to see in the Bronx, and I was super excited about that. I don't have a favorite per se. I enjoy the warblers because they're just so cool and colorful, and it's just mind-boggling to see these colorful birds in the neighborhood, like, sometimes literally right next to dumps. Egrets, like, whoa, and herons, like, wow. So I haven't locked in a favorite. I just kind of just love that they're all here. And northern flickers, like, the first time I saw one, I'm like, this don't even make sense to me. Like, you look so different than all the other woodpeckers. And
Yeah,
you're on the
why are you on
ground.
the ground? Yeah.
Like, I text a friend. I'm like, "Yo, this bird looks like a woodpecker, but it's on the ground." And that was like one of the first times with the northern flickers and sparrows. That was like one of the major lessons that I learned to get rid of the preconceived notions. Where
Mm,
it's like you need to look on the ground for birds and not the trees.
right. I mean, they take advantage of all the layers, right?
Yeah, I always get excited when I see a thrush. So I don't know, like it's hard to pick a bird for me.
Yeah, I have, well, this is my favorite raptor, and this is my favorite warbler.
Yeah,
And
or maybe like season, like, yeah, I couldn't pick a favorite. I really couldn't.
yeah.
I like fall. If we get to pick a season, spring migration is fun, but I love fall because you have some of those late stragglers from the summer and spring. The leaves are falling off, so it makes it a little easier. And, some of the ducks might be coming in early. So I find fall to be a favorite season. So I do have a favorite season, but not a bird.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, fall is a really special time because it's almost a little bit of the reverse in terms of color, right? So in the fall, the foliage is colorful and the birds are less. But in the spring, the foliage it's all sort of green. And then you have these really colorful warblers coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, I get frustrated that I can't see them behind the green leaves. So I
Even
hear
though
all
they're
this,
so brightly colored.
I hear all this chatter, but I can't see them.
Do you have sort of goals for your spring birding or sort of short-term goals for yourself as a birder?
Yes and no. I'll start with the no. So the no was because last year when I first learned about having a big day and everyone was out doing that stuff, I was one of those folks that went out there and attempted to get a lot of numbers on a specific day. And I was struggling. I was by myself. I still consider myself a beginner birder. So, I wasn't getting a whole lot. And I'm looking at this borough wide group chat and people are like, "Oh, I'm up to 80 this, I'm up to 100 and something today." And I just felt like a total failure. And the timing of it wasn't ideal with personal issues. So, I found myself just not enjoying birding in that moment while I was riding my bike, something else that I thoroughly enjoy. But then I had to like remind myself, like, wait a minute, like these things bring me joy. Why am I adding so much pressure to
Hmm.
myself? And that's when I realized that it's no longer about numbers of how many species I see or, did I get the rarity that, that everyone else is trying to chase. I'm just going to enjoy the process of birding. I'm just trying to see and be able to identify a little bit more than I did the previous year. Not trying to chase a big year by any means, but I know if I saw two or three more species than I did last year, this time of year, that means I'm out there or I'm able to identify a little bit better. So that makes me feel good that I'm learning, so to speak, but I'm also outside. The number will be the number, but so long as I'm outside and continue to, pay attention and be present to what I'm seeing, those numbers will be increasing on their own.
So you've mentioned mindfulness a few times, and just now you talked about paying attention and being present. Can you talk about the role of birds and birding in your mindfulness practice?
Sure. For me, it's just a way of kind of birding, the act of birding and the birds themselves is a way to disconnect from society and the chaos of like day to day living or surviving in some instances, and just finding a way to kind of just be present with the moment. I do think there's a lot to learn from birds, even when it's like a bunch of blue jays making a lot of noise and getting a red-tailed hawk or bald eagle out of a tree. There's a lesson there, coming together and being active and organizing, so to speak. But the mindfulness for me is just being so present to notice the small little things that, who knows, were probably there all my life, if not most of it. And I
Hmm.
just was so involved in something else that I didn't see what was literally in front of me because I didn't take the time to notice it. And it's just something very calming about just intently listening. Like I've told a friend of mine one time, like, you very clearly listen. If you have the capacity to hear, we all know we listen. But have you ever paid attention while listening? That's the difference. Like, you're not just listening, you're listening to your listening.
Hmm.
It's just like an added layer. So when I'm in the park, like, I'm there, I'm so present that I'm not nowhere else, and that's really great.
You don't go into the park with your earbuds in, hoping to
No,
hear a
no.
bird.
Yeah, not at all, or so it's just, yeah, it's just, you're just so in the moment. At least I am, that you forget about bills, you forget about stress and anything else that might be going on, and you just have this time, whether it's a quick 20 minutes or 2 hours, where you're part of nature and the way you was intended to be, and not how society has created this version of existing.
That's really beautiful. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you would like folks to know about you, the way you bird, and specifically about birding in the Bronx?
For birding in the Bronx, or just birding, I think it's definitely something that anyone's capable of doing. I've introduced my mom into birding by putting up feeders in behind the apartment, and at first she was like, "Oh man, like, you're just gonna make a mess, and you're just gonna attract a bunch of ghetto birds." And now she can bird by ear. She's able to identify cardinals and blue jays and woodpeckers. She's out there feeding them on top of the feeders more than I am. So I think that birding truly is for anyone. You don't have to have a set of binoculars. You don't need a fancy camera. Just pay attention to the birds in your neighborhood, and even those little brown sparrows or European starlings are beautiful in their own right when you start noticing a lot of the activities that they do. And don't put the pressures on yourself to like know all the birds and have all these. If you don't know, you don't know. It's okay. Like, just appreciate what you're seeing in that moment. It's not about the knowledge. It's about just being present and enjoying the time that you have to observe these very interesting creatures that are actually dinosaurs. A lot of people don't know that. Birds are dinosaurs. They didn't go extinct.
I love that you've introduced your mom to birding, and you mentioned earlier finding out that friends and a cousin are also birders. So it seems like this activity is sort of revealing other aspects to people that you're in relationship with, which is one of my favorite things about going outside and looking at birds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Edmundo, I really want to thank you for spending the time with me. I would love to go birding in the Bronx with you because you've mentioned many parks that I haven't been to or didn't know the names of. So it would be really wonderful to do it with a local guide.
Please come up. It'd be nice. I'm not a guide, just a fellow community member who can point out a few birds and know where some others hang out.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Bird Story. Tune in on the second Thursday of next month for the next episode. In the meantime, explore our archives, like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your Bird Story is edited and produced by Pod to the People. Your Bird Story is an initiative of Local Nature Lab.